Welcome to the Brisbane Property Talk podcast series. My name is Greg Blake, and today we have a special guest, Geoff Kennedy, who's part of White Room Architects, is a principal architect and director of the company. Just one question straight off the bat, Geoff, and welcome. White Room Architect. As soon as I heard White Room, I thought Eric Clapton, and I also thought, is it White Room because of the White Rooms being a blank canvas, and being an architect, you come in and I suppose you bring the white to life. So how did White Room Architecture come across?
Yeah, I think you're right on two fronts. In a white room with black curtains, definitely a classic.
Yeah.
But also my passion for skiing. And so the white room is in skiing where the snow's so deep.
Yep.
That you're in it, and every time you turn, the snow rushes up over your face, and that's really what a skier lives for.
Yep.
It also, the Eric Clapton reference, that's definitely there. And then, as a blank canvas, like you said, so those were the three elements that went into it. Feels like a bit of a design thing. For those in the know, skiing and cream.
Yep.
For those yet to be in the know, it's a blank canvas to design from.
Yeah, no problems. Okay, so White Room, White Room's got a few different meanings, obviously. So a little bit of Clapton, a little bit of White Room as in the blank canvas architecture design, and snow skiing. So that's
right.
So that's a little bit of a it's a little bit of a different passion to most Queenslanders, mate. How did you get into snow skiing?
Well, I was born in Scotland, and we got to slide on the snow in the sleet and rain. And that's where the passion began. When we came to Australia, my old man said he'll take me skiing in Australia. It never happened. So when I finished school, I got on a plane and I went to America. And I spent my first winter in the snow there and never looked back.
Yeah, awesome. So that was straight out of school?
I went first to university, and then as soon as the university holidays came, I took the summer holidays here and made it a winter holiday in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, right. So just with school, getting ready to look at university and that sort of stuff, always wanted to be an architect?
I think so. Growing up in Scotland, and my father was a wannabe engineer and wannabe builder. So he worked as an engineer in the North Sea, an engineer with no degree, that is. As I think the best engineers are, actually. So he built a house for us when I was a kid, and one of the proudest moments I had as a 4-year-old was putting a couple of bricks in the wall. So the brickie let me lay a couple in, and that's what sparked it. Always wanted to do it ever since.
So your dad being an engineer in the North Sea, was that a Nordic background in engineering, or what was he, what was he working on?
Yeah, so he was an Aussie. He went to the UK for 3 weeks for a holiday and stayed for 30 years. But he was drawn to the North Sea. His brother was working in oil there, and my father's a concrete expert. So he put footings under the ocean to keep oil rigs in place.
Yeah, right. So, and self-taught?
Yeah. His brother went to technical college here in Brisbane, went to the North Sea, got a job in the oil rigs, and then my father came out for a holiday, and my dad had a lot of big ideas. So he was the ideas man, and John made them work.
Yeah, right. So in lots of ways, maybe passively, what your dad was doing and you wanting to do an architect is sort of a little bit sort of down the family line, so to speak, but you're making it become reality where your dad's making sure it doesn't fall down.
That's right. Both valid enterprises.
Yeah. So architecture, mate, is it typically the UQs of this world, or is it QUT? What sort of typical universities offer that sort of style of profession or learning?
Yeah, so here in Brisbane, QUT and UQ are the two main ones. Griffith also has a architecture degree. I went to the university for the real world.
Yes.
At the time, they had a great program where you worked in the profession. So the program required you to have a job 4 days a week. We went to university one day and one night, and then spent all the rest of the nights doing the assignments, which was really a great system. You finished after 6 years, and you had 6 years of experience working your way through seeing, yes, the libraries and the art galleries that you want to design when you're a university student, and you get to design when you're a student for your assignments, but also the toilet details and the nitty-gritty of putting a building up that you get to see in an office.
So with that, early on, what was sort of what was the process you enjoyed the most? Was it looking at a concept and trying to make it come to reality from an engineering point of view, or was it sort of these are the requirements that we need, where there's no wriggle room, and then there's a little bit of creativity after that?
Yeah, so for me, it's this balance of art and science, and that's what draws me to architecture, where you get to be creative, but you have to make something that can be real, something that can be built. I think we have a pretty bad name for making things that can't be built. So, I encourage anybody who wants to do architecture to get a job on a building site, lift a few bricks, watch how a building gets put together, and really think about how things go together.
With the trends over the year in architecture and design, is there a particular period that you like the most?
That is a really tough question. What
I'm here for.
So, if I could design a building once in my life that was timeless and couldn't have a period put on it, yes, I would be a very proud man. I could die happy. Yes. For me, my favourite architect of all time is Charles Rennie Mackintosh out of Glasgow. So he's sort of an arts and crafts movement. It was a time when you could have decoration in a building, and he was a great proponent of having decoration that did something. So the Glasgow School of Art, which unfortunately burned down in a fire a few years ago, had magnificent details, wrought ironwork that came out of the building in front of every window that on the face of it was decorative and looked beautiful, but it also took a plank so the window cleaner could get up and clean the windows. So for me, doing multiple things is what the best architecture does.
Still being functionable.
That's right. Yeah.
It's interesting, and we'll get into in your properties a little bit later. But we were talking about one of the houses in particular, yours, and I made mention that the gable, which again we'll get into, but typically a 1930s, 1940s property. Arch gable roof, and what you did to it, I said, it looks very Hampton-y, and you then sort of mentioned that the Hampton style, even though we sort of associate it with sort of America, but it's very much a universal design, isn't it?
That's right. So it's based on the colonial architecture that Queenslanders are made based on. So the British colonials went to India. They developed the Bangala style, which was a central core with large overhanging eaves, and those eaves created the veranda. And then from there, the colonials moved to Australia, moved to America. The Americans created the Hamptons. The Australians created the Queenslander architectural style, but they both branched from the same colonial roots.
Sure. And before we get to White Room, so typically leaving university, is it a cadetship you still move into as far as an architect goes, or once you graduate, you are a full-blown architect? So
things have changed a bit since I went through school, but you you still need, so you finish your architectural degree and then you need to complete practical experience hours. So when I went through, I think it was 3,000 hours you needed to get into fourth year, and then another 3,000 hours after graduating to be able to register. Now it's similar, but there's no practical experience requirement during the degree because unfortunately we've had a few boom and bust cycles and nobody could get a job in one of the bust cycles, and so that part was scrapped from the degrees, which is a bit of a shame because the graduates now don't have that level of experience when they come out. But essentially, degree step one, then you have an interview and an exam. And once you've done that, then you're a registered architect. And you can go out into the world and ply your craft.
Awesome. White Room Architect, how did it come about? Was it a long process, short process? How did it become reality?
Yeah, so 10 years ago, 2014, my wife Taryn and I were living in Canada. We're doing a lot of skiing. I was doing a bit of architecture work at night for some other architects I'd worked for here in Queensland. Got the great news that Taryn was pregnant, and we decided to come home. I wanted to obviously raise our kids near our family, and thought, look, if the time is ever, the time is now. So left Canada in April and started White Room Architects on the 1st of July 2014, and just went all in. Nothing quite like an expecting baby to make a young man work hard.
And debt.
Yeah, and debt.
Mate, very good. So was that working from home to start with, or you went straight into an office situation? How does one start?
So I started working from home. We had a room that was 1.8 meters by 2.7 meters, and I had me and one other person working in there. When we moved from that space to the first office we had, we rolled the carpet up out of that room to use as a moving blanket, and put it down in the new office and built the meeting table on it, and just sat there and reflected how we used to just work in that one little space.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so that was just a couple of years. We spent a couple of years in that room, and grew from there.
Yeah, awesome. And then moved into the office that you're in now? Or?
No, we moved into the office in Ashgrove, and we spent a few years there. And then during COVID, nobody was using the office. So we have a small team now. There's me and two other architects and an administrator. So we're a pretty small team. But what we noticed during COVID was that we didn't need the big overhead office. So we work from my own home now, and everybody works from their own home as well. We get together virtually, and we get together physically in the office a couple of days a week each.
It's an interesting point because your professional, your style of work is certainly not unique when it comes to that. I think a lot of businesses have learned a lot of lessons, post-COVID about, being able to work remotely, efficiently, having large overheads in bricks and mortar that they may not necessarily need. And I think that's sort of one of the lessons that we've all learnt post-COVID about, being more efficient, yeah?
That's right. And I think what COVID taught a lot of people, clients and professionals, is that you can be a real professional and work from home. That you don't need a fancy shop front to prove your worth. Where I think before that, there was an undertone of if you're working from home, it's because you haven't made it yet. But now it's because you choose to work from home, and that's a valid choice now.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like back in the old days in sales. You used to have to wear a shirt and tie, and because the perception was that you couldn't, you weren't professional if you didn't have a tie on, to me, anybody that knows me knows that I prefer not to wear a tie. I do when I need to, but I also turn around and go, how does a tie make me a better salesperson?
That's right.
So, it's just the way my wacky brain works, really.
And then architects wear black T-shirts.
Yeah, right. And drive VWs.
Something like that.
Okay, mate. So let's get in a little bit of White Room, and we've got this presentation behind us as we walk through. And now, obviously, the first slide we get after the official title slide is a pretty broad landscape. What's the meaning behind this image?
So it starts with the site. This is a site that we will have a building on soon. It's under construction now, but architecture is inherently of its place. So you have to put a building somewhere. It's not a car. It's not something you carry in your pocket. Part of me wishes that it was location neutral so I could be skiing, but it's not. It's tied to a place, and it's got to be of its place. It's got to respond to the particular environment that it's in, and it's got to be for the people who are there. So that's where it starts. If you've got a project, if you've got an idea in your mind, if you want to get something out of the ground, it starts with the site. It starts with the place. And
with that image, are we looking from the house site where the house is going to eventually be, or where the property is going to be?
That's right. Basically, where the shot's taken from is roughly where the main living area is going to be. Somebody, I would say at least 50 years ago, had the foresight to go up onto the prow of that hill and put a D9 over about 600 square meters. It's basically a hanging flat site poking out into the valley, looking straight at Mount Earwa in the distance there.
And mate, we didn't talk about this in the brief, but I'm curious, what was the brief, or what is the brief for this build?
So this is a home for a couple who retiring from Brisbane up to the Sunshine Coast, so they plan to stay there forever. They wanted to capture the essence of the place. And so to get a bit of an understanding of that place, the first thing I did was go and camp up there. So I spent the night in a tent. I got to hear the cows mooing. I got to see where the sun came up. I got to see where the sun went down. And I got to really know just a little bit, only at one time of year, but a little bit about where the noises come from, where the light comes from, where the best views are, where the not so good views are, where the breezes come from. And that just really sort of informs the position that we start with from designing. An urban block's a little different, but every block is unique. And anybody who says you can slap a house on from a standard set of designs is kidding themselves in about what's really possible and what's really good in architecture.
Okay. Size of the house, typically how many bedrooms is this thing going to be?
This thing's going to be three bedrooms, but it's a big three-bedder. There's also a granny flat that we've designed on the site, and then there's another visitor's quarters over the top of the garage. So it's generous. It's a generous three-bedder.
Yeah. And build time?
Build time is about 18 months on the site. And, typically we're around about 12 months from the time that we start designing something to the time that we could be ready to build.
Okay.
So it's quite a lengthy process that surprises a lot of people as to how much time and effort and forethought, planning and design goes into making a good building.
From your initial, the first time you laid eyes on it, I'm assuming whenever you arrived on site, the next day, did your perception change of what you thought was the conceptually where you were going to take the property?
It did to some degree, but that site has one feature that is unmistakable, and it is a draw card, and that's the view of that mountain. Yes. But what I did notice was how the light changes on that mountain across different times of day, and how your experience of that changes.
Yeah, cool. All right. So let's go through it. Obviously, we're looking at a population density. Just talk us through this slide, mate, and what does this slide represent for you?
So this is really just something about talking about people and looking at where we are. So we start off with the really macro view, and then we dial it in. But the most important part about this slide is really the diagram of the people chin wagging off to the side. So that's what we do. We talk. We talk with our clients. We get to know them. We want to understand how they think, how they live, how they breathe. So then we can make really good choices when we're designing to make it for them.
So you're a collaborator.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's no such thing as good design. There's only good redesign. So we design, we talk, we interrogate, we criticize the design, we challenge the design until we're satisfied that it can't be challenged any further, until we're satisfied that although you can always pick apart someone's design, that we want to have an answer for the reasons why we've made those decisions, and we want to challenge those decisions. And then once we've resolved that, we're at a really confident place to go, okay, let's go and build this bloody thing.
Yep. So is it similar like an artist where in lots of ways they'll finish something, but they still look at it and go, at what point is it finished? Is this, could I have done more?
Absolutely. At a certain point, you have to draw a line in the sand and get on with it. But there's always a learning from a job, and there's always something you could improve. I'm sure anybody who's ever put a building up would agree that if you get to the end of a building project and there was no problems and there was nothing you would ever do differently, you were not part of the team.
Yeah, and have you been in the situation where the vendors turn around and gone, yep, that's perfect, but in your mind you've sort of gone, no, I think we need to sort of address this a little bit more?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's times, and there's certain times where you back the design, and clients look to their architect for confidence in, is it good enough? Has the builder done a good enough job realizing what we have set out to realize? And part of the architect's job is to push for the vision, but also to know when it is good enough and to let the clients know that it is good enough. And there's nothing in this world that's perfect, but there's a balance, and we strive for pretty good.
Yep. Okay. Next slide. One of the projects you worked on.
Yeah.
Tell us about this slide.
Devonshire House. So this is my client's initial sketch for the brief before he engaged us. He sat down, he put his pen to the whiteboard, he got a few images that inspired him of what he thought his house could be, and he still got it up on his whiteboard today. I was at the house a couple of weeks ago, or last week, and we were doing a punch list of things we want to address to finalise the job and to prepare ahead of getting our photographer through to take some completion shots. And I just had to take a snap of it because it's I think we've achieved what he set out to do, although we've pushed some boundaries a little further than he had initially thought, but he's over the moon with it. And the fact that he keeps that proudly, he's gone and got another whiteboard to use for his work, but he keeps that one proudly and can't rub it out. This puts a smile on my face.
How often would you move into with a potential client where you sort of faced with pretty well, a concept like that?
Oh, it varies. And
is it easier to work with that or
no,
from a blank canvas?
Oh, look, it's a renovation job, so you're working with something that's already there. And even a new build, these days, you touched on it earlier, the rules and regulations. If you're working in an urban environment, you have constraints and limitations on your site that you just have to deal with. And So that sort of blank canvas in a renovation doesn't exist. But to get back to your question about whether it's easier or not, it's really just part of that understanding who your client is. Some people want to walk alongside you the whole way. Some people want to pass you the baton and have it back at the end of your lap. And we're happy with both. It's really just getting to know your client and then working through that together. But really the best thing is a client who cares.
Yeah. That's cool. So we spoke about this as well. So this was the demolition drawing?
Yeah, so this is one of the demo drawings. This shows the front elevation of the house at Devonshire there. And, you know, working in a character area in Brisbane, the council's got quite a lot to say about what you can and can't do. And I think rightfully so for a lot of houses.
Yep. So 1920s house?
1920s, and then we renovated 100 years later. So the concept was to bring this 1920s house into the 21st century and to do it respectfully, but also to take advantage of the whole site and to make it as good as it could be.
Outside of the visual appearance, what are some of the challenges of having to work with a property of that age?
Yeah, so square, plumb and true. That's what we like out of our buildings. But, you know, these buildings were put up quickly with green timber. What might have been square when the chippies put it up ain't square now. And one of the challenges we had with this particular building was measuring the ground floor and the first floor. And I measured that building 4 times. And when I went back to the office and drew the CAD plans up, I was racking my brain why these walls that line up don't line up with the measurements I've taken. And it wasn't until we were under construction and had done some demolition work that I realized the building had racked. The walls were 30 mil out of plumb. So they lined up in real life, but they lined up on an angle. So, you know, and 30 mils, 50 mils, you know, you could say it's neither here nor there, but when things that are meant to line up don't line up, architects got a problem. Well, the carpenters on that job actually did a pretty decent job. They ripped wedges and plumbed up existing walls for us to put joinery on and got it pretty good.
So you work with a master set of drawings. You come across that through the build process. Does that mean you have to readjust your drawings, or is that working in conjunction with the builder or the carpenter in this instance to be aware of some of the pitfalls or some of the variances within the build?
Yeah, so it's a bit of both. There's certainly times where you express the logic in the drawings. The post goes under the intersection of those 2 beams. The post goes there. Whether it's 25 mils this way or that way, it doesn't necessarily make too much difference. But there's times where 25 mils does matter in joinery, in wet area details. And so we build into the contract process that detailed drawings get produced by the person who's actually going to do the building. We call them shop drawings. Mm-hmm. So we'll be involved in the reviewing of those shop drawings. And part of that is to make sure that the actual measurements that are there on the building site when the job is happening are taken into account. But another part of that is to make sure that the craftsman who's putting the detailed components together understands the vision. And so it's a two-way process.
Yeah. Awesome. So obviously this is part of the excavation of the block.
Yeah. So this is a different house. This is my own house. We bought that house because it didn't need anything done to it. We were just going to move into it. We'd finished the renovation. My wife said, "Not doing another one of those." Yes, dear. I put the last bead of caulking on the bathroom the day the real estate agent came through. And boy, I didn't get much of a smile out of Taryn that day.
So architects are a bit like other tradesmen, mate, where typically their own properties may not necessarily reflect the finished article like they do in the professional when they're being paid.
It can be. It can be, but you put a decent project in front of us and tell us to get started. When we're in, we're in.
Yeah.
But that was really just about, letting people know that it is hard work and it is dirty and it takes a long time. And if I haven't convinced you not to do an architecture project yet, just wait longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Slide, you need a team now. Obviously, with a lot of the questions and a lot of the discussion we've had up until this point, it's pretty obvious that you can't do this as an architect needs people around them to help bring their vision to reality. So obviously, teamwork is essential, a part of what your profession's about.
Yeah, that's right, and that goes right from the beginning of a job through to the completion of a job. So we rely on surveyors to tell us what the lay of the land is to great detail. We rely on town planners to let us know what we can and can't do. We rely on a whole host of experts to get through design and approvals. And then we rely on builders and craftsmen to put the building together. Yeah. And it's really a culmination of everybody's efforts that gets a building up. Yep. And really at the end of the day, the end product is not the drawings. We produce drawings, but nobody goes to an architect because they want a set of drawings. They go to an architect because they want a building. They want to live in it.
And not fall down.
And not fall down. And we have a structural engineer for that.
Yeah. And obviously part of that process, mate, is, you got to have patience and it's not something that happens straight away. So, obviously patience is important in the process. That's
right. And, there's times when you need to hurry. And we're doing a project at the moment for a family that needs a place for an aging parent to live. And they're in a hurry for it. And so we turned around an approval for that in 3 months, from the time they walked in the door to the time we had a builder on site was 3 months. But that's not the normal process for us, as a smaller job. But typically we like to take the time it takes to get a really good design together. And I like to say in the first stage of design, sketch design, there's no rules. It is what it is. It takes the time it takes, and I encourage all my clients to take that time to ponder it and to think about it and not be in a rush. And then once we get past that sketch design and we're all agreed what we're going to build, then we're on and progress it as quickly as we can. But it really is for a new house, you should expect to take around about 12 months from the time you engage your architect until the time that you are engaging your builder on site and turning over a bit of dirt. And that can be longer.
So why bother, mate? Why bother using an architect?
Why would you bother? I mean...
No, but I think it's a good question. I mean, because, I think it's sometimes, in lots of ways, it's an understated part of the process. And, and people also perceive it as maybe being an expensive part of the process.
Yeah. And a lot of that is not tangible. You're not buying an object that you can put on your pocket or that you can show off, or, a piece of furniture that you can sit on for 20 years. You're buying a service, you're buying thinking, and you're buying experience. And it is an intensive process that takes a lot of time, and that can add up, but it does yield dividends. I like to my goal whenever I make a building is to make that place better in 50 years than if I had never started. And so to have spent a year thinking about it and testing and getting it right seems like a no-brainer to me. If you want to put a house up that you think's got a 25-year design life and you don't really care who's living there in 10 years and you don't care how it performs, then just buy a house and plonk it up. But if you want something that's good, consider it. Use an architect if you want to. Use a building designer. There's great people out there with all sorts of qualifications. But get to know them, get to know what they do, and then decide who you want to work with.
Hey, let's get into some of the properties now.
Yeah.
That you've designed, mate. Devonshire House. So that was the property that was on the whiteboard.
That's right. That's the house as it was the day I went to measure it up.
Yep.
Adam had owned the house for a few years, and he was ready to put his vision to life.
Yep.
So beautiful old Queenslander. It had previously been built in underneath, perched up on the hill. You could just about get a Hilux up there in the dry if you had four-wheel drive engaged.
Low range.
That's right. So the RAV4 you can see parked in the war era bunker down the bottom.
Yeah, so it's a pretty typical build, I suppose, on an elevated block, reflective of the era that the house is. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and there's some serious topography on that site.
Yep.
You know, there's about 13 meters of elevation gain from the front to the back.
And that's what it looks like.
That's what it looks like as of last week. So there's a few little things here to go, but I thought I'd sneak a few photos for your good podcast listeners and viewers to enjoy. So we
so like for me, I think what I take from the finished product is obviously the master suite bedroom, which is over the garage. That's to me that still reflects the style of the house. It looks like it looks like it should be there. Something else that you mentioned was the sewage. There was a significant amount of sewer works that needed to be undertaken because of the reduction of the gradient of the driveway, and obviously the stairs.
That's right. There was retaining walls all over the site, and yet there still wasn't very much usable flat area, and there certainly wasn't very much accessible means to get from the street to the house. So that's what we tried to address. There's 28 risers in the stairs that go from the front gate to the front door. I know that because I spent many hours working out the details of those stairs. But, I wanted it to feel like you were walking up something that wasn't Mount Everest. So on each flight of stairs, your eye level's already above the landing of the next target. So that really makes it feel like you're not climbing up something that you're going to precariously fall over. It's not a mission. No, it's actually quite a pleasant experience to go there now. But it was a mission for materials to get up and down, and it was a mission to get up and down before we started.
And obviously the pool area with the pool structure. You were mentioning earlier that it's predominantly a metal structure. And the ceiling is a combination of timber, but it's also a ventilated style ceiling.
Yeah, so there's a Vagola system in there, which is a series of louver blades that allows you to open up the roof and get light and ventilation into that outdoor barbecue and dining area. And then it's got a rain sensor, so it'll close down if the rain comes on. So you get basically the best of both worlds. Yeah. Yep. But you need cover.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think also to Arthur's point as well, I think the use of colour, particularly just the white, gives it that really big, fresh outlook. Whereas if you look at the previous colour, it's really washed out. It's there's not a lot of highlight there. It looks washed out. Whereas the white gives it, which was part of the brief from the customer, but the white really gives it a stance from the road.
Yeah, it does, and it lets the building features speak for themselves. It lets us celebrate the form of the building and not necessarily trying to pick out the individual details, but let the building talk for itself.
Yep. And I'm pretty sure that's inside.
That is inside. So we spent a little bit of time on the external stairs, but we also spent a little bit of time on the internal stairs. So the client really wanted a curved staircase. And we thought, well, that's going to be a challenge. It's going to take up a fair bit of space. And will it be worth it? And we tested a lot of options. and we decided it was worth it together as a team. And so we detailed this steel monostringer. We've got the curved glass, which is curved in two directions, and the steel is curved in two directions. And, the guys that fabricated that steelwork did a tremendous job. And, that's what you're greeted with when you enter the front door. We lifted the roof off the back of the house, and we put these 4.2 metre high ceilings in at the back, and we put glazing that strategically allows views of the sky and trees, but blocks out the overlooking of neighbouring verandas to the rear. And so you're greeted with just lots of natural light.
How long did it take for you to come up with that concept?
It's a tough question.
Did you have to camp there to find it?
I didn't camp there, but fortunately it was only about 1 kilometre from the office. So I did spend quite a bit of time on the site. But, what I did do as well is we had survey information, not only of our own block, but also of all the blocks adjoining. So then I was able to 3D model the mass of each of the neighbouring buildings. And then using the 3D modeling software, we build the building in virtual reality, and we can look and see where all the views are. And we can strategically push and pull building elements to allow us to control views, but also to make the most of the solar aspect. So we're doing shadow study diagrams. So we model the building in 3D, and then we geolocate it, and then we run computer software so we can see the shadow locations at various times of day on various days of the year. So we're typically looking at winter solstice, summer solstice, and the spring equinox. So the spring equinox or spring-autumn equinox is basically your average. That's your middle ground. But we're wanting to have options where we can sit in the sun in winter, and we're wanting to close that sun out in summer. And here in Brisbane, I sort of think of it as not a 50-50 split, but a sort of a 9-3 split. 9 months of the year you wish it was cooler, 3 months of the year you wish it was warmer.
Personally, I think that's the money shot. I just think that's a great blend of modern and, still retaining the timber, which gives it that, would still, gives it the older heritage part of the house. Just probably to tailor on to Arthur's question about blank canvas or existing M&M house, brand new build, yeah?
Brand new build for a busy professional couple. I actually met this couple 10 years ago when White Room first started. They said, would you like to renovate our house? And I said, sure. So we did a few sketches, and we sort of decided that maybe this isn't the thing to do. So we parked on it for a while, and then 8 years later they phoned me up and said, we're ready to get rid of the house. We want you to design as a new house instead of a reno. So this was for them, and this was a completely different style to what you've seen before. And it's really a reflection of the client's lifestyle and their ambitions and their own unique flair. So, the orange front door, the white bricks, the black steel, the gold aluminium. These are all pretty gaudy combinations. If you just describe it as black, white, orange, gold.
It's almost got a little bit of industrial feel to the outside as well.
Yeah, it does. And so we had a great time putting this together. And this was a client who came to us and said, we want you to make something for us, but we don't want to tell you how to do it. So it was a really interesting combination where we got to know them really well, and it was great that we'd known them over the years anyway. And then we sort of picked a few anchor things, and Mark didn't want to paint every year, every 10 years, every 5 years. And so what can we build that doesn't need to be painted all the time? And brick bricks, the durable material, you repoint it every 50 years. Yeah. But,
Well, I mean, if you look at the internals, first of all, the style of the outside is very much, to me, is very much being brought inside, throwing a little bit of elegance with the aisle and bench. But the minimalist is, the stone is basically maintenance free. The polished concrete floors maintenance free. Obviously the internal brickwork and things like that. I mean, it's very much that that flavour or what the customer was looking for.
That's right, and it's bringing the outside in, and it's an honest reflection of that material. So those bricks are not treated; they're not treated any differently inside and out. Most of the house is a brick veneer. As an old mason, you'd know about solid construction and veneer construction, but we did do some genuine load-bearing double brick, where we brought it inside. That holds the roof up, and bringing that really kind of tough exterior material inside, but then softening it with other elements.
Oh, I think it looks really cool, and the cabinetry, to me, it's minimalist, but it looks very, very because of the minimals of the cabinetry, things don't get complicated with inside the kitchen.
That's right, and keeping things simple is what we strive for. I think it's a trick for young players to think you're engaged to design something, you better make it fancy, you better make it complicated. But in reality, more simple is more elegant, is more useful, and more timeless.
That's obviously that's the image of the property from the road. I think that sort of semi-industrial style, gaudy, like you mentioning, I think that sort of more highlights it with, I'm assuming that must be the garage down the left-hand side.
Yes.
And the metal inserts in the fence.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing, when you're looking at the front of a building, I feel like you should be left in no doubt as to where you enter. So the client's love of colour shone through on the front door there. But
Just a question, those louvers in the windows, do they move at all? Or?
no, they're a fixed aluminium anodized square profile tube.
And the angle of them, did you go through that same process with geoing and lights and all that sort of stuff to get the maximum protection?
Yeah, we did, and it's kind of a balance. So what we also wanted in that instance was for shadows and light to dance on the inside of the building. So it wasn't just about cutting all of the light out. What cuts the worst of the summer sun out is actually just the eaves overhang, the distance between the edge of the roof and the openings in the building behind. So we just had a small veranda there, and that in and of itself does most of the solar control. But in winter, when the sun's lower and you want to invite some of that in, coming through that screening really projects fun shadows onto the inside of the building, and it makes seasonality part of the experience of living there. And that's something I think in our Queensland climate we miss out on compared to a lot of other climates. You know, we have hot and not so hot. And coming from Scotland, we had 7 seasons in a day.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and also cold too.
Bitter cold, yeah.
Dorrington House?
Dorrington House. So this is my own place. Like I said earlier, we bought this place thinking we'll just buy a house this time that doesn't need a big renovation, and it didn't. But then COVID happened, and my mum wasn't coping very well living alone while she was isolated, and so she would come over and stay for a few weeks here and a few weeks there when lockdowns happened. And Taryn and I spoke, and Mum spoke, and we thought, wouldn't it just be easier if you moved in? And Taryn graciously said, "Yeah, let's have mother-in-law move in, but let's have some separation." So we have our bedroom up on the top level. There's a communal middle level, and there was a lower level that was previously car parking and undercroft, and so we looked to take advantage of that space and make a space for Mum to live.
And Dorrington House, the name you called the house that, or was it always Dorrington House?
That's the name I call it. I'm very creative with house names. It's on Dorrington Drive.
Yeah, nice. Mate, it must have taken you hours to come up with the name.
That's right.
So again, age of the house?
So this is 50s, late 50s, early 60s.
Yep.
It was a post-war house.
Yep.
It was previously lower on the site than it is in that picture. In 2007, the previous owners did a building designer renovation. So there's a big box added onto the back and it was lifted up.
Gable garage that doesn't really do anything for the style of the house?
That's right. Well, that was actually added at the bequest of the real estate agent because you need to have two cars. And so the owners never had that until about 3 months before we bought it. They quickly knocked up a carport.
Yeah.
I'm glad they did because 2 cars was on my search criteria.
Yeah.
Although we have a different take on 2 cars now.
Yeah. Start of the excavation process.
That's right. This one we pulled 600 cubic meters of dirt out from underneath to make way for the granny flat. We propped the house and did it in 2 stages. So rather than having the Jenga block style sties that would hold a Queenslander up while you excavate under it, we used acro props and we propped half of it, put the footings in for that half, then we propped the other half and put the footings in for that, which meant we could get a little mini excavator in and move around the site much quicker.
And probably a pretense to the next slide. If you look at the block work on the right-hand side of the property, that's probably going to give you a bit of an insight as to the size of the house and possibly what garages are going to look like and things like that.
That's right. And we spoke with the neighbours about what we were doing. And we said we'd like to put a 9 metre long built to boundary wall, 3.5 metres high. But we'd also like to put a garden bed on top of it so that there's a bit of green space between your veranda and our veranda. Paddy and Kath said, sounds great. Let's go.
So you didn't even have to bribe them with alcohol?
Didn't have to bribe them with alcohol. I did build a little shed slab for his falling apart bricks.
Yeah.
But it cost me about $50 to throw the forms up and a few beers for the concreters, and Paddy got a new shed slab.
Yep.
While we just off the excess of one of the trucks. But I mean they're happy. That built to boundary wall goes next to their water tanks and bin store, and then they've got their deck up on the right there and our new front deck up on the left, and now the plants are just starting to grow up. They probably need another season before we have real visual screen, but it's nice. So that's a view of it this morning.
Yep. It's quite grand, isn't it? And very the lines are very determined. There's
Yeah, so originally the stair was external, and if you wanted to get something out of your car when it was raining, you had to go out into the rain and duck downstairs and go inside. We wanted to have an internal stair, and when you put a stair in a Queenslander, where you put it's always the big choice. Where are you going to sacrifice floor area? Are you going to put it in the darkest spot, or are you going to use it to bring light into both levels? So we found a spot for it. We created a front entry foyer that was communal to both the granny flat and the house, and that has a stair that brings you up.
Is that the barn door there? Is that part of the entrance?
Yeah, so that barn door takes you through to the entrance. So between the garage and the foyer, there's a mudroom, a space to put your school bags and your shoes, somewhere to sit down and tie your shoelaces. So that's just behind that barn door, and then the front door is tucked around the corner there to the left. So,
and something we spoke about, the suspended concrete ceiling.
Yeah, so the original house, the corner of it sits where the white ceiling meets the timber joists, and there was a run of 3 columns right down where you want clear space to bring cars in and out of. So I spoke to the engineer and I said, I want you to build me a suspended swimming pool in the sky with no columns underneath it. And he said, no. We can't hold it up. And then I said, well, what if you had a 1.4 meter high concrete beam? Would that span it? He said, yeah, but you'll never fit it in. And so we decided to make the beam to hold it up be also the balustrade to separate the deck from the garden bed. So that gave the engineer what he needed to get the scale to work. I then decided to leave it off-form concrete so we could see the story from underneath and from upstairs. Formwork didn't turn out quite how we wanted, so I decided to polish it. But that's a story for another day.
And how long has it been built for, mate?
It's been completed since the middle of last year.
Okay.
So it's just getting worn in now.
Yeah. And still now it's, I suppose for me when I walk in, when I was doing my stonemasonry, some houses just had that feel where you went, yep, this is got a great feel to the house. Have you still got that same feel with it?
Yeah, I love it. And I enjoy living there every day.
Yep. And this is the granny flat, by the way.
Yeah, this is the granny flat looking forward towards the front door and the stairs, so you can see the foyer in the distance. Mum's granny flat. She wanted a full kitchen. The original design was a kitchenette, so we could, you can come upstairs if you want to use an oven, and she would have no bar of that. So she got a full kitchen, but what we had to compromise was the dining area. Mum was prepared to let the dining area go by the wayside to have the kitchen that she wanted, but I wasn't prepared to let that happen. So I designed this table that we had a local furniture maker craft. That's
almost like an island bench servery breakfast
That's
bar.
right. Yeah, integrated in, but sitting at a dining table height, so it's a little bit more comfortable. And as Mum ages, then she'll still have somewhere comfortable to sit to eat her dinner, and me and the kids go down there for dinner a couple of nights a week too.
Yeah. Bathroom?
This is one of the bathrooms. Again, just clean. We use the same solid timber. Try to stay away from veneers where I can. Again, the timber work there is going to be as nice or nicer in 30 years as it is today. If it gets scratched, you can sand it back and refinish it. So whilst it is a bit more of an investment up front, it's durable and lasting.
And natural stone.
That's right.
Yeah. Pool, which is part of the tech box.
That's right. Yeah, the project wouldn't happen without a swimming pool. Taryn always wanted a pool for the kids to splash around in growing up and bust off a bit of steam. So there was no other opportunity. We were going to build ourselves out. So that's what we started with. The first day of digging was the pool. We got that in and up and running, got the kids into it. And we cut about 300 mils off the back garden level so that we could come out of the house onto the deck at the same grade. And then it's just very minimal grade changes to direct water away from the building, but you have no steps between the house and the outdoor living area.
Just a question. I had a property up on the hill at Northgate, big old Queensland, and we put a pool in basically the full width of the block of land, so it was about 20 odd metres long. And second bucket of the excavator, we hit rock. We didn't realise at the stage. So basically, a half a day's digging turned into 4 or 5 days digging. What was the challenges with the excavation around the pool and just generally with this property?
For this property, the challenge with excavation was really the confined space. We got pretty lucky with the soil conditions. It was sort of a schisty rock that was rippable with a machine, but pretty ideal to found a building on. So that was a real plus. Another challenge with the soil there was water flow. So we've picked up the water with a series of drainage at 3 different spots before it gets to the building, which is critical. But yeah, all in all, pretty decent founding material. The builders that were involved looked at me a bit funny when I asked them to vacuum the bottom of every pier before we put the concrete in, but that's what we did. So you could eat your dinner off the rock at the bottom of each pier, and the settlement available is pretty close to zero.
See, That's why they hate you guys, see?
Yeah, but I was also prepared to lay on my belly and put the vacuum nozzle down the
nice.
bottom and suck that dirt out.
Yeah, nice. Now, this is the middle level, so this is the living area out the back.
This is at the front.
At the front, sorry.
Yeah, so this is the north-facing deck, and that's the concrete beam that you see on the right there. That's what holds the whole front corner of the house up. That's all poured monolithically with 2 concrete lintels over the garage doors. Would be too easy if we put a column underneath it. So, but that again, deep veranda facing north, so we control sunlight hitting the building. We can go out there, sit in the northeast corner and enjoy a cup of coffee in the winter morning in the sun, or we can go out onto the back deck and seek shade in the summer. But it's about having choices and different areas that are special at different times of the day, at different days of the year.
Awesome. Geoff, thanks so much for joining us today and talking about your craft. I mean, some of the things that I picked up on, particularly looking at the builds, is around your garages and those workspaces. They're very simple, but they're very functionable, and they've got that almost that sort of commercially robust look to them. And yeah, we move into the inside of the houses, and there's, the straight lines, less is more, and the colour that you use within the properties as well. It just gives them a very, very clean look. Would you consider that's your style?
Yeah, I think so. I try and be styleless.
But how do you?
Perhaps that's a style of its own.
Yeah. But how do you do that? Because there are there's trends like in everything. I mean, but at the same time, it would be. I think the challenge in your craft would be an individual within those trends.
That's
without
right.
being a radical, I suppose.
Yeah, and look, to be honest, in terms of the trends that come and go, for me, what will be forever is the place, and I try not to use materials that are new. The materials that we've tried and tested for hundreds of years are the materials we go back for. So we've got concrete, steel, timber, glass. It's not a material that somebody invented 2 weeks ago. I'm yet to see a piece of plastic sit out in the Queensland sun for 30 years and still look good. So don't put plastic on the outside of the building. But yeah, durability is definitely a big item for us. And like you said, with the garages, I'd love a man cave.
Yeah, a little secret sliding door that opens up. Mate, one last question. I heard granny flat a lot through the conversations. You've built one, the new build right at the start. They're having a granny flat. We sort of went through the era of media rooms, and then there was the rumpus room in the 70s and 80s. Is there something that people are looking for that they consider their must-haves at the moment when you're looking at designing a home?
Yeah, and granny flat's up there. And I think if we're going to catch on to it, or if there's going to be a fad and it's granny flats, then I'm all for it, because what it does is it allows multi-generational living, and that extends your family unit, and it creates strong families, and when families are close, things are good.
Hey, Geoff, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thanks so much. I could talk about this sort of stuff for hours, because one of my passions was the St Paul's Cathedral in town. I very much would have loved to have worked on that in my trade, but I didn't get the opportunity. Again, mate, thanks so much. We really appreciate you coming on Brisbane Property Talk. Mate, why would anybody not want to engage with White Room Architects if we're getting a property or some sort of dwelling building constructed and brought to life?
Thanks, Greg. It's been a pleasure.